Tom? Want me to try to unmute you? Yes? Okay. I'm gonna ask Belle for some help because you seem to be stuck. So Tom, I am having difficulty unmuting you. So I called Belle and she's gonna hop on the meeting and see if she can solve the problem.
So Tom, I'm gonna hit a button called Ask to Unmute. And so you should see a dialogue, a chat box that comes across that says, please unmute yourself. I'm trying to read it through your glasses. Nothing. So do you have, if you bring your mouse down to the bottom of the screen, does your bar pop up with all your controls?
Hey,
There you go.
now I tried that 5 times and it didn't unmute. I don't know.
I need to be needed, Tom, so thank you.
Okay,
All right.
thank you, Bill. Now I'm muted again.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay, good. I've got my phone right beside me in case I have to resort to that.
You notice how quick she was to hop right on board and help
Yeah.
us out. So if we need her again, something tells me we can get her. Oh, somebody's hand is raised.
Josh Ewing.
Hi there.
Hi, Josh.
Sorry I missed your message, Sophie.
Minor. We can connect first thing tomorrow morning. I just need some information about a couple of your officers.
My cruiser is hyper vigilant about not even alerting me if I have a text message. I have zero information when I'm driving.
Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all. And I like the fact that you're home so that you won't be super late. See, that's a good thing. It all worked out. By the way, I did not hear back from Portland.
Okay. Interesting.
Sure.
I think on this end, they're eager to meet, so.
So, you know the whole dog ate my homework thing? Dog ate Lainey's retainer. So we're headed to, we were very happy to get it away from the dog before the dog swallowed it.
True, and have a vet bill too.
Yeah. So I gotta head to Waterville in the morning. So could either try to effort things along in your neighborhood that we could meet early. I gotta be on the road by 9:15.
All right,
Or we can meet in the afternoon when I get back to town.
that might be easier. I don't know how long this is gonna be. There may be some, it just might take a little while to massage everybody's egos and get down to the meat of the matter.
Okay. Well, I need to hear from Portland,
Right, fair enough.
so maybe they could effort that.
Yes,
Along.
true. Good point.
Yes.
I don't see anybody else joining us.
Give me just a second. So Tom, it looks like we have Counselor Osher.
Okay, I don't see her on my, oh, yes, I do. Thank you.
Apologies, I still haven't figured out my camera situation.
You've got company there. So I think we'll get started, Sophie. It's after 5, I believe. My phone says 5:01. We may have some others joining us as we get going, but I'll call the December 28th meeting of Finance and Operations Committee to order. Councilor Osher and I are present, along with our fire chief, police chief, and I think finance manager.
Yes, Counselor Gardner is also present. I think
Okay.
she might just be on a separate screen for you.
All right, and Councilor Gardner is present. So next item on the agenda is parking, revenue, and enforcement. I bet that's Josh.
It is. And I don't want to take up a lot of time with this. This has been something also that has been brewing since our trip to Durham, New Hampshire in, I think, 2015. So I want to see if the council has an appetite for the idea of moving from free parking, which is what we've done my whole career, free parking with violations and fines that turn into revenue when there are people that are in violation of the ordinance, moving that towards the idea of a paid parking system for our busier streets and parking lots. So, and there are multiple ways to go about this. And so if you have an appetite for it, then I would come back at another time and kind of give you an overview of those options. But it could be as simple as actual meters, parking meters that are both digital and accept money, to the idea of a mobile app in which people would input their license plates, and that's how we would track their parking. It would kind of encourage the turning over of parking more frequently, I think, particularly for the merchants downtown. There wouldn't be necessarily people parking all day. Or the idea of and there'd be a mobile app that would kind of involve some efforts on our part to have like a handheld device that would know when how long the car had been there based on the license plate, do an online billing system, would all be stored in the cloud, all the way to the idea of parking kiosks, which I think you'd be familiar with in other cities, Bar Harbor being one of the more recent ones, where you put your input, you put your data in, including your car and the license plate, the spot that you're in, and it's all done digitally on your phone through digital pay processes. So really just kind of tossing it out there to say that maybe it's time to move toward the idea of paid parking. There can be all sorts of customization. The one company that I spoke to, you can customize for your residents. So maybe there's a reduced rate for your residents, or even a free rate for your residents. Maybe there's an hour, the first 2 hours are free for people, and then the billing begins. There are all sorts of options. I really just want to see if this is something that you're interested in me pursuing.
Well, there. Councilors, any reaction, comment?
And I think particularly with the Main Street corridor, also, we're looking to, when that is done over the next few years, where there's going to be additional parking that will take place along Main Street, that would just provide for another opportunity for us to perhaps gain a revenue source that doesn't have to be punitive in nature like it is now with fines for people who violate the parking ordinance.
Well, on the one hand, I don't dislike a revenue source. On the other hand, this would be a very hot button issue, I think, for our community. And what I would be very curious, I mean, I know that's what I expect. My expectation when I go to Bar Harbor, or when I go to Bangor, is that I will likely have to pay for parking. I'm curious about communities that are more comparable to ours in the area, not talking about Durham necessarily, but, and not to say a college town, but a community of our size is not quite the same thing as the major tourist destination of Bar Harbor or the region's major city of Bangor. So I would want to know more about comparable communities in this area if I were trying to make a case to residents that this were a good way to go, because my sense is that people would not be happy about it, visitors or residents.
Fair enough.
I think you're right, Megan. The other thing I'd be interested in is what is the opinion of some of our downtown merchants who would be most directly affected? Would they say, boy, this is a great idea, we're not going to have people taking up parking spaces all day? Are they going to say, you know, if a person goes by and has to pay, they may not stop? So I'd really be interested in what our downtown merchants think about this idea before I got too into investigating it personally. But I do think it would be a hot button item. And I don't think it would be well received, to be honest.
I can tell you that for 20 years, I've said this before, the most emotional people that I have in my office are people that have had to pay a parking fine. We've arrested people for violent crimes, and they get less emotional about being given a parking ticket.
Yeah.
For overtime parking or for a snow violation. So it is something that has been perennial for 20 years. There's been nothing but there's no parking in Orono. What are you going to do about the parking in Orono? And how can, when a college student lives over Pat's and they park their car all day, that's taking up a parking space that could be a customer for me. So really, this was merely it's very little investment on my part so far to check with a couple of companies. Really, absolutely wanted to see what your appetite was for.
I did see, Josh, one of the things you mentioned, it could be arranged so the first 2 hours there was no charge and only charged after a certain amount of time. I thought that was an attractive concept if we went in that direction.
It does encourage turnover for those, like the parking spaces, say, on Mill Street.
Yeah.
It does encourage much better turnover by people, but just a thought.
Yeah, the question of, the frequent complaint, I should say, of there's no parking, but that's not actually true, as we've discussed many times before. There's no parking directly downtown where people want to park and be able to walk 10 steps into their business of choice. So we have all of these spots in other lots that are not that far away. And I'm very curious still, I know that this is part of more of a long-term plan, but in terms of mapping and signage, how are we able to drive out of town visitors to the downtown to the, what I don't even want to call them satellite parking spots, because they're not really that far away from downtown when you think about it.
Right.
It's more of psychological, in my opinion. But I would also be curious whether that would have an impact once we start seeing more traffic in the area post-COVID. If directing out of towners to the municipal lot behind the municipal building, or by the
Credit
UCU
union.
would have
Yeah.
would have an
And
impact.
maybe those more premium spots downtown are the ones you want to charge for.
Possibly.
Plenty of options.
Could you
Or-
repeat that? After you said the more premium spots, it's kicked out and I didn't hear the rest of the sentence.
Well, to Megan's point, in order to get people maybe to use some of those parking lots that are a mere 100 yards away, adding a premium to charge for those spots that are downtown that are so convenient, that are right outside the door of the business, maybe that would be the route we would take in order to charge for parking. And maybe the outlying spots are free.
I think that would be great. I think that we have plenty of parking, and when we've talked about this before, everyone else seems to agree with that. But how to get other people to feel that would be, maybe they'd have the relief that if they park in those other spots, they don't get charged. And that does leave those spots open for people who are visiting. And people come from outside of our town where it's hard to find parking, would be so pleased to find parking, and then I don't think they would be too upset about paying for it. Although you just said that people come into your office to complain. Who are they? Who specifically is complaining about the parking?
People who have been issued parking tickets. Anybody, residents and visitors. And let's remember, I don't think that the parking, even in Bar Harbor, what are you talking, $1 an hour, $2 an hour? It's really minimal. As opposed to a $30 parking ticket for being, half an hour longer than you're supposed to be.
So people who are getting parking tickets in Orono, where are they getting? They're getting tickets for parking on the street when it's supposed to be off the street during snow time?
Right, and when we're vigilant enough for the 2-hour or 4-hour violations downtown on Mill Street, and then in the parking in the Pine Street lot.
So I know Mike has been retired for a while, but that Mike Ambrose was a perennial reminder for us
Yep.
that we needed to turn people over on Mill Street. And I think this is where kind of this started to bubble up. And then our conversations when we started building parking spaces of how much a parking space actually costs us to maintain. So this isn't coming out of the ether. I think Josh and I just don't know if now is the time. And what we don't want to do is create a problem for council if council is like, well, we're really not thinking this is the time to have this conversation.
I personally don't think during the pandemic is the time to institute anything like this. I think there are enough issues out there already. The part of it that I do personally have interest in is Mill Street and limiting the 2-hour parking or the 4-hour parking. I would have some interest in pursuing that, but not charging for the lot behind the town office or over at UCU. So I don't see it as something that I'd want to do immediately, but something that I'd be interested in pursuing a little bit.
I'm
We can
inclined
certainly
to
ease into
agree.
it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with basically everything that Thomas just said. I also just want, and even though it might not be a lot of money, we still, I'm just going to register the fact that we have had conversations as a council in the past, particularly around snow removal or the question of folks who might have a little too much to drink and leave their cars in municipal lots. And we have talked in terms of snow removal about, well, yes, there are rules and there are tickets that can be issued, but unless that car is in the way of a snowplow, we sometimes try to be a little kinder. So what I'm saying is, I don't think there is an expectation among residents and visitors that the parking, the current parking ordinances around 2 hours or 4 hours, that those are actually very strictly enforced.
They're not.
And they're not strictly enforced. So the expectation of the public, both the residents and the visiting public, is that if they leave their car there for a few hours, nobody's going to ticket them. If it's not a snowstorm, it's probably not a problem. It's better safe than sorry to leave the car there overnight. I mean, these are things that are sort of the accepted fabric of living and hanging out in Orono, and have been for a very long time. So I'm not saying this is a reason for me to be opposed to anything. Again, I agree with everything Tom just said in terms of my interest in exploring it, but not instituting anything during a pandemic. But there's a lot, you know, maybe we have been guilty of mixed messaging. And so to then say, now we're going to have, you know, paid parking because, well, it's better than us fining you. The folks out there are going to say, well, you're not fining me now most of the time. So, you know, now you're just asking for money.
You're absolutely right.
Putting it out there.
We are pretty vigilant about the ticketing during the winter. Because, and we've been less forgiving about cars that are blocking snow removal. Because we've learned from Public Works, we don't have time to hope that it's going to get moved in the next half an hour if they're trying to plow. So we're almost talking about two different things. The snow removal and overnight parking is something we try to be pretty vigilant about. And this is really, you know, this isn't something we could implement overnight anyway, because there's a budget involved. You know, these systems don't come for free. So it would be a down the road capital planning type thing in order to purchase the systems. And so we're a long ways off. It really just wanted to plant the seed, or not at all. I'm fine with that too.
Well, for me, you've planted the seed.
Okay, fair enough. Good. Then we're good.
And I have some interest in exploring at some point, some limited aspect of it. Any other comments? Excuse me, Josh.
No.
I think that any transition is challenging for people, and so lots of advance notice is helpful.
Yeah.
And there are very good reasons, and that's why you've been doing your investigating about how we might do this. So I support doing it, and I think if we said yes now, I don't imagine you would do it right away, because you'd be honoring the people's need to have a transition. And I'm ever the optimist. My hope is that in the summer, we are seeing more people coming to Orono and enjoying being in Orono and not feeling the crushing strictures on our interactions with each other that are necessary in this COVID time, and that hopefully in the summer we'll have had enough of vaccinations and the caseloads and will go down, and our threats will go down, and we'll see people here. So I think it would be a lovely time for the people started to come back to Orono would be the time that this is enforced. They have lots of beautiful days to be able to walk that extra 100 yards. And when they find that they're going to, then they'll know in advance, those who are local, that they're going to have a charge. So I guess I'm supportive of you doing what you need to do to move forward this, knowing that it will take many months to put into place.
Fair enough. I think I wasn't even thinking about that soon. I think it would be FY 22 perhaps, or 23. There's a lot of information that I don't have. Your folks aren't, your heads haven't wrapped around it yet, nor have you guided me on how you'd want it to look. So we were a long ways off. I really think that we'll come back to this at some point when, like Lori just said, when things are back to normal, maybe it'll feel a little bit different to talk about it.
And I think a key ingredient for me is going to be getting some feedback from merchants if we want to seriously pursue it.
Absolutely.
You ready to move on?
Yeah, yep, I am.
Okay. The next
This-
item,
Go ahead, sorry.
the next item on our agenda is Orono Police Department Community Policing Priorities. And is that you, Sophie, or is that Josh?
I think I'm actually gonna take it and then offer Josh the opportunity to clean up if he wishes. We had put this item on the agenda, thinking that we were going to kind of roll out our new community policing priorities and structure and some changes in the department. Since we talked with council, we have opened conversations with some key community partners and continued conversation with the bargaining unit, the police bargaining unit. Those conversations with the bargaining unit are still ongoing. So we're not quite ready to roll out because things might be tweaked a little bit. And I would like the opportunity to come back next month and share with you what we have done, as opposed to lay out kind of all of the potential places we might go, which we might not end up.
That sounds reasonable. So we'll look forward to hearing more information on this topic next month. Public safety operations update.
I can continue before, because if I let Jeff go first, he's gonna make me look like an idiot. So he's probably got some beautiful presentation with a video, and I'm just gonna be off the cuff. So we'll see how this goes. I think what the intent here is to kind of tell you how 2020 has progressed for us and how it's wrapping up and what the impact is and how that looks for at least for the police department. And I was thinking about this when I was going out to get the mail. Like everyone else, like every family and every individual and every business out there, we've been on a roller coaster ride during this year.
Yeah.
We were willing at the beginning. It seemed pretty reasonable for us to put on the brakes and pull back from our operational normality and restrict our operations. And there was an adjustment period, as we all well know, there was an adjustment period of getting people to wear masks and maintaining some distance from everybody that we tried to deal with. But then that kind of relaxed during the summer and we were able to go back to normal operations. They went back to doing their jobs, which is what they joined law enforcement for. We do pound into them the idea of community policing, but they're also police officers and they do enjoy enforcing the law and stopping people who are driving drunk and finding drugs and taking weapons from people. So they do enjoy that aspect of their job. So this summer they kind of geared back up and got into that again and enjoyed it. And there was plenty of work to be had. And then, towards the end of the semester, we went right back into once Orono had a few cases and the case count was rising, I put the leash back on and restricted their operations. I didn't want them unnecessarily getting into contact with people from the public unless there was some kind of an emergency taking place. So to put them back into that box and to tell them your job is to respond to emergencies and I want you to limit your contact, it's taking its toll The length of this is taking its toll, I think, on their morale. I'm seeing in a little bit of even the infighting that takes place within the agency it kind of increased a little bit. They're still doing a fantastic job, and they're still towing the line. What they've been told to do, they are doing. I think they're just getting tired, just like the rest of us are. And in December, early December, we ended up with 2 positive cases. So 2 of our officers have to, isolate themselves at home. One of which, has a spouse who is compromised medically. So, he's literally isolating himself at his house from his family. So those 2 cases branched out into 4 more people who had close contact. So now they're not coming to work for 14 days and told to stay home, which then puts a huge strain on the department's, just our staffing ability, and the fear that we can't cover all of our shifts, which we managed to do. We scaled back a little bit, made some people work some overtime, and still didn't feel like we were pushing them too hard, but it would just taken one more step, and we would have been at a point where you'd have been policed by other agencies for a period of time until those quarantines were over. So we made it through, and we're back. Everybody's back, and we're hoping that we don't reach that point again. But it does add to the strain, I will tell you. So take all that, set that aside. The larger pictures with just training alone has been severely impacted. We had an officer who would have graduated the academy in May, who had been sent home in March. And they did a valiant effort to get a lot of their classes done online, but not all of what we do can be trained online. And they finally finished that up in December. So that officer finally graduated the academy, and he is considered a blue pin. He is fully trained and can operate by himself. We have another officer we hired in February who would have gone to the academy in May and would have graduated by now, who has not gone to the academy, and there is no start date yet for the 2021 academy. And I'm hoping that we hired him early enough, because now remember that usually 100 or so officers are on the list to go to an academy each time. They take 60 or so officers that make it into the academy for that 6-month period. I hope that his hire date is early enough so that he is on the very first list of the academy that will start sometime in 2021. But we're looking at whatever that start date is. If they can start reasonably soon, 6 months from that date will be his graduation. So well over a year, likely a year and a half easily before he is a full-time certified officer. And I will say the academy they are working to do a hybrid of the academy. So there will be a considerable amount will be online. Whatever classroom work that they can do will be done online, and then they'll have a shorter residential period, which is normally the 18 weeks. It'll be a much shorter period of time so that they can do the hands-on portion in a shorter amount of time. But all that is up in the air, and I don't know there's no start date yet. Add to that, we have the judicial system right now is at a standstill. Very, very, very few cases are being tried due to the logistics of getting people into the courtrooms and cycle them through in ways that we can remain socially distant. So the state has moved to some online Zoom or phone calls actually for their Bureau of Motor Vehicle hearings. And the courts are still doing theirs pretty much in person. There's a move right now to switch to a Zoom style court hearings for those who are willing. So there's a little bit of progress there. But there's also there's plenty of talk of eliminating many of these cases and switching them either to civil violations in order to clear them. So a lesser violation, no criminal conviction, and a fine related. And right now there's talk of as many as 12,000 outstanding warrants being purged from the system. So people who haven't paid their fines, wiping those fines clean. They haven't gone forward with that, but that is an option that's out there right now, which can actually provide a little frustration to the police officers who have gone out and done their jobs and gotten good convictions and charge people with crimes to see those go away. So all in all, while our officers, particularly during the day, I'm seeing some upbeat, positive, there's laughter and they're making the best of it. There are some frustrations that the police department is experiencing, much like all of you in your own personal lives and your businesses. So that's where we stand. We're really hoping that the vaccine will make a huge difference. And like Lori said, if we can get to the summer and maybe some of this eases up, I think we'll see some things turn around.
Josh, the officer who has not been to the academy, is he riding with other officers at this point?
He is. He's had the 2-week pre-service school, which qualifies him to be a part-time police officer. Our standards don't allow him to work by himself.
Right.
So he's been technically on a field training program or a modified field training program since we started with him. So he's able to do the job, but he's experiencing much less of the job right now because of our mode of operation. But yeah, he's constantly with somebody.
Good. Any questions for Josh?
Yeah, these fines that you said were gonna maybe be eliminated, what are they fines for?
They're all sorts of, I'm sure they're not major crimes, but there would be thefts, probably disorderly conducts, criminal mischiefs, misdemeanor crimes that people owe fines for. Could be drug possessions that I think the state, in order to, because there's an additional problem with the jails, particularly Penobscot County is just so overcrowded that they're begging us not to arrest people, because if we arrest them, we have to bring them to the jail. It's just a process that they're overcrowded and they're receiving some pressure from the state. So part of that would be to ease because if we run into a warrant, that's an order from a court to arrest somebody. So we typically arrest everybody that we run into that has a warrant. Once we've identified that they have one, it's an order by the court for us to take them in. So I think that might be part of the motivation, is to have less burden on the jails.
This affects everybody, that's for sure. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Josh. Appreciate the update. I didn't hear anything that I was shocked to hear. I think we're all facing a lot of the same things in different ways.
Mhm.
Chief Lowe, I think, can talk a little bit about the fire department.
Good.
Sure. So we have been in pretty much the same operation mode we've been in since March, which is a guarded mode where we dress out for medical calls that we go on for patients that we know are confirmed to be COVID positive. And for those that are experiencing some type of symptoms, we will typically dress somewhat differently, but always wear the highest level of respiratory protection and safety glasses, which is the current standard. That has not gone by the wayside. So that was the first thing I was worried about, was fatigue with wearing PPE all the time. So I mean, that's been a good thing for us, that they've maintained that posture of self-safety, if you will. What has become an issue for us and is starting to show cracks in the system is just the amount of overtime that's associated with COVID. Not so much staff members being exposed to it, but family members being exposed to it or having close contacts or those types of things. So for example, in Josh's case, where he lost the 2 police officers due to COVID, there were 3 of my staff members that had close contact with that police officer. Those 3 were members of the senior leadership team. Plus I had a 4th member who was out because he had a required trip that he had to make to Florida to deal with a family estate. So out of 6, not including myself, out of 6 people that I rely on to run the fire department on a day-to-day basis, I lost 4 in the span of 48 hours, which really kind of put a crimp on, could have potentially, I should say, put a crimp on how we were operating. I was able to get the traveler back and delegate some duties and reassign some stuff. And I was ready to step in where I needed to, as was Deputy Chief St. Louis. But it just goes to show how one unexpected incident or one act of, I don't want to say carelessness, but letting your guard down can really affect the entire operation. Overall, our morale is pretty good. There are plenty of projects that these guys are interested in doing. They're plucking away at stuff around the station. They are looking at long-term things for us. You know, our training building is something that they've been focusing on. There's a lot of EMS related things that they're focusing on as far as training and whatnot. So we're not as bad off as Josh might be with not being productive. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but not having hands-on doing stuff. But that's only going to last for so long before there's going to be a want to get back out there and do calls. And we have seen a decrease in calls. We've seen a decrease in fire calls. We definitely have seen a decrease in EMS calls. I'm looking at a few hundred fewer calls on the EMS side of the house than I was looking at last year. We run a calendar year for our run statistics. So at the end of December, I'll print off a report that shows where we were last year versus where we are this year. And of course, as you know, that's going to correlate out to a revenue loss as well. And I don't think we have a real good picture just yet of what that is going to look like. Those are things that we're coming up against. We don't have an issue with personal protective equipment right now. When things started to slow down in the springtime, I had my purchasing guy order everything he possibly could. So we do have a bit of a surplus, which is good. The equipment is holding up. You know, we're following every best practice we can. So overall, I think on the fire side of the house, we're doing okay. But it's just important to recognize that just like police, as with fire, we're not very thick in layers, and it takes just one happenstance to really affect both organizations or potentially affect both organizations. And when that happens, you can really end up in a deficit where Josh may need, some of the local agencies to come in and cover for him. You know, we may need to activate a task force from the state to come in and do some coverage for us or whatever the case may be. So it can put us in a very bad spot. There is so much stuff going on. I work in addition with Rob, St. Louis. We work with the university a lot. We're constantly meeting with the university about the COVID stuff. We've started having open conversations on every other week basis with the RSU. So there's been a line of communication open there. We're offering support to the businesses, but there's so much going on all the time, and it's so dynamic that it's hard for me really to know what to tell you. So I guess if you had some questions or whatever that you wanted to know about, I'm more than happy to answer what I can, or if I can find out answers. One thing I will tell you is that the vaccines are coming to our staff. There are two tiers. Tier 1A is going to be licensed EMS providers, which is everybody within the fire department. And I think it's January 8th, if I remember correctly, we'll be receiving our initial vaccine for those members that want it. And then I believe it's about a week later, law enforcement and other critical agencies will be receiving their vaccine as well. So that's what we're looking at right now. Of course, that's subject to change on vaccine availability, transportation, federal regulations, whatever else that could potentially go wrong could certainly affect those timeframes. But that's what we're looking at right now. So I guess if you all have questions or want to know anything, I'm more than willing to talk to you and ask away.
Questions from folks? I'm interested in the testing protocol the university is putting in place for the students who are returning. Can you tell us anything about that?
So what I know right now is they are going to actually, I shouldn't say this with certainty. What has been discussed right now is they're actually going to increase the testing that they do on the students when they come back. So in the spring, they recognized that it was an issue. They started a testing process. They picked up on a lot of cases. After break, they have recognized that the risk is potentially higher, where people are going home, they're going with their family. Certainly, New Year's Eve will be a reason to celebrate. It's, the turn of a new year, hopefully a new chapter. There's more expectation that people will be out doing things. So they are looking at increasing the amount of testing that they're doing. As far as specific types or actual amounts, I can't tell you that.
Yeah.
All I can tell you is without a doubt, it is going to be a very, it's going to be a very rigorous process that they're looking to put them through.
I read the article in the paper recently by Chancellor Malloy. And I guess the thing that I was wondering about, and I know you can't answer it now, but maybe we can get some information at some point, is previously they were only testing students living on campus. They were not testing the students that were living off campus, is my understanding.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if they're going to continue to do it in that manner, or when they say they're stepping up their testing, does that include students living off campus?
I think the students living off campus were part of a random testing scheme, but it wasn't, uniform across the population.
That's right. And unfortunately, I can't answer that because I don't know what the makeup is going to be. The numbers that they're talking about would lead me to believe that that will be something that's offered. But again, I'll have to double check that just to make
Okay.
sure.
Good. Thanks, Chief. Any other questions or comments for Chief Lowe?
The
Right.
only comment I would make is that the labor union for the fire department has really come to the foreground and partnered with management to try to ensure that we are using effective safety protocols and training. And I've been really, really impressed with local leadership. They've done a nice job.
Nice to hear that. Okay, if there's no other questions for Chief Lowe, we'll move on to the next item, which is review monthly financial report. And I think people received these today. Sophie, are there things there that you'd like to highlight for us, or?
Yeah, there's some glimmers of hope and some areas of caution.
Yes.
On the revenue side, we were really pleased to see the road subsidy come in about $17,500 higher than what we had budgeted. So that was really good to see. And parking permits, people actually bought permits and we have over collected there. So that's good to see. Interest is coming in about where we would expect. We're about halfway through the year and we've brought in about half of what we would expect to earn on interest on our general fund, which is good to see. We did make the final payment on the economic development debt for Godfrey Drive. That was the $1 million balloon payment. So our money in the bank is down a little bit, but we're still in good shape there. Joe, I think in general, the other place of revenue that I am continue to remain very concerned about is ambulance fees.
Mhm.
So we're at about 40% of what we would expect to bill, let alone where we are with collections. I reviewed that a little bit with Tom earlier today. Collections are not in a horrible place, but they're up a little bit from what I would like to see. So in general, we're not seeing the cliff that we were concerned about on revenue, but we're also being told that when you listen to the finance officers, Governmental Finance Officers Association and other trade groups, they are telling us we're not yet seeing the true impact of the pandemic, and it's likely going to come. It's not here quite yet. So
The two items that caught my eye, Sophie, were the revenue sharing continues to come in higher than we had budgeted, which is good.
It is very good. The revenue sharing is up, and also, it's not just higher, Tom, than what we had projected. It's actually still trending higher than what the state, when I
That
look
is
at
good.
what the state had thought. So, remember when we went through the process of floating the bonds for the public works infrastructure and the refunding, we were told that we needed to increase our fund balance. And this, if we can maintain a fairly even expense year, budget, stay on budget with expenses and bring in a little more revenue on the revenue sharing side and excise tax, that will put us in a nice position to begin to recoup some of those fund balance losses.
I'm surprised on excise tax that people are still buying cars.
Oh, that they are. We are seeing lots of new cars, new leases.
Yeah,
Um,
great.
yeah, I
Okay.
guess there are lots of good programs out there. Which is, good to see. Very good
Yep.
to see. So that's what I have for revenue. I thought I would talk about taxes separately.
Mhm.
And on the expense side, I am seeing some places in the budget that, for example, in the library, Lori is spending more on online items than purchasing physical copies of books. And what I have told my staff is, as long as we can manage things through departmental budget adjustments, I think that that's reasonable. We're not in kind of normal circumstances. So postage and office supplies are a lot higher than we normally would see because we're doing so much more through the mail and through drop boxes and things like that. We've had, so I don't see anything that is way out of the norm. I did highlight for Counselor Perry that in code enforcement, we run a budget of about $4,100 for legal expenses, which we call professional services. And we're $3,700 over in that line. And that has to do with an appeal that went to the appeals board. A lot of legal, we needed help untangling the permits because they got overturned. So I do expect that that line is going to continue to overexpend, not at that rate unless we have another appeal. But it's something for you just to kind of keep an eye on.
Right.
We are seeing in the fire department, where normally we talk about unscheduled overtime, sick coverage, vacation coverage, we're seeing that right now. We continue to have a firefighter. We have one that is on long-term medical leave, and we have another that is still on restricted duty coming back to leave. But when people get sick or have to be out, we're having to backfill, and it's happening at a rate that's a little bit higher than we otherwise would have expected. We are seeing that the new hire, Sam Weissman, is helping us out, so we have slowed that hemorrhage down. But I would expect to go over there, hope that we can hit the bottom line. The COVID-19 overtime lines that you see in public safety, and only in public safety, they are significant. However, they are all in line for reimbursement through FEMA. So we hope that those will zero out.
Good.
In the fire department, some of the individual budget lines are way off, underspent in some cases, overspent in other cases. If you recall, we, during the budget process, Chief Lowe separated mini budget, broke out to a higher degree in his budget individual lines. So for example, instead of equipment maintenance, it's pump testing, ladder testing, fire apparatus maintenance. And the reason for that is for us to be able to better track down the road how we're actually spending those
Yep.
funds instead of one big lump sum. What happens with that is, for example, in repairs and maintenance, he left $32,000 in that account. We spent 6,300, but we've overspent fire apparatus by 1,000. So this is going to be, he's going to have to just refine how he's going to use those lines. Public Works has overspent hand tools a little bit, and I think some of that has to do with the way we're having to break up crews. We're not having big crews go out, so you can't, he's having to double up some of the equipment to make sure he has what he needs on the scene, out in the scene. You don't see it yet, but in the solid waste disposal, we are gonna likely be under budget on our tipping fees because waste is down. However, our recycling is going to be significantly overspent. And we're gonna see that on the recycling tip fees. We had budgeted for the $37 a ton to tip our recycling, and Coastal closed. And so we are at $135 a ton. And what we had agreed to do last year, which I assumed council would be fine with this year, when we get to the end of the year, if there is an overage in the department, we will use the solid waste reserve to cover the recycling. That we felt like it was important to stay with a sorted, well, single stream, but not in your waste separated recycling. Some of our training lines are up and over, and you'll see we're taking advantage of some professional organizations are giving training in how to provide services during the pandemic, or how to manage our way through this. So, I mean, I think we'll be in good stead there. And I think when you look, those are really, there is an issue that Connie's going to have to fix in our debt. We booked all of the final payment for the SCBA equipment, which is the Androscoggin Bank debt payment, to the general fund. $7,500 of that belongs in the hazmat fund, just the way we broke out that purchase. So we will correct that and be in good stead. In general, I think we're doing very well. I don't think you'll see major overexpenditures this year, which should be good if we can keep up. I mean, we've got 6 more
Right.
months.
Right.
I think we're doing well. On the finance side, we've also I engaged the bond attorney, so you would expect to see a resolution and public hearing for the wastewater pollution control budget. Capital infrastructure project at the Mahaney development that is going to pair with Rob's. We're making an application to the state revolving loan fund, which we're asking for loan forgiveness, which is not 100%, but it would potentially give us some reduction in what we have to pay back. That project right now, the budget's at about $950,000. So it is it's a costly, needed budget. Tax collection, we're getting ready in February for our final payments. Our second half payments on taxes. We are doing fairly well. We're a little bit over 50% collected. And I still have to work with Shelley this week to go back to our foreclosures. We had a couple. I am not sure. Our next step is to do a review to make sure that everybody got notice. And if they did, then we'd start to try to reach out to the property owner about redeeming their parcel.
Mhm.
That is what I have on financials. Cash looks pretty good. We've got about $5 million in the general fund, which is a comfortable place to be right now. I was kind of nervous about that. So I think our choices on investing, the numbers we pulled for investing are working out pretty well for us.
Thank you, Sophie.
And next month we'll talk about gains and losses in our investments. We'll get our quarterly report. Would you like me to ask Peter and Nazarene to join us at that meeting?
Well, I think it's good to meet with them once a year. I can't remember exactly when we last met with them, but especially with the investment world being so topsy-turvy right now, it'd probably be good to meet with them.
I'll take a look with Nancy, and if we're around a year, then I'll go ahead and ask them if they can join us. I've been working with them with MRC, so I know that they love Zoom meetings.
I'll bet. Any questions for Sophie on the financial report? If not, thank you very much. Anything else that you need, Sophie, on that topic?
On the finance report, no, I think we're good. I have a couple things on the manager's report.
Yep. So we'll move on to the manager's report.
So I want to give a couple of updates. The first is that our assessor has given notice of retirement, and we're working with him to have a nice orderly transition with a planned exit on January 21st. He is currently working with our contractor Vision on the reval. So we want to make sure we leave everything in really good shape to not slow the reval down. So normally when somebody leaves, we go through a process of evaluating the position and deciding, do we need the position? If we need the position, do we need it in this construct? Is there something, do we want to revise the job description? You know, we evaluate. And when I was doing the evaluation for this department, number one, we are required under state law to have a certified master assessor working for the town. Does not have to be employed, can be a contracted position, but we're required to have one. We're in the midst of a reval. That reval will give us property cards, the ability to put things online so that people don't need to necessarily come into the town office or call us to get information from us. And we really don't know what the world is going to look like in terms of the demand on the department at this moment. So I'm really concerned about hiring a full-time person with all the benefits that we pay for the position if we're not 100% sure that we know what the needs are going to be post reval. So I reached out to the city of Bangor, talked to Kathy Conlow, their city manager, to talk about whether or not we could think about contracting for service with the city of Bangor. Talked to, had my staff talk with their assessor, who they're very busy right now and don't have room to provide that service at this moment. Then we reached out to the state of Maine and talked with Joe Sally, who runs the municipal services side of Maine Revenue Service. And so Joe works with all the local assessors on all of the variety of issues that they have. So he has a pretty good sense of the pulse of the state. And he was very supportive of the idea of waiting for the reval. He thinks that's going to tell us a lot. And given our valuation, there are other communities of similar sizes that are not staffing a full-time in-house assessor. So we might be able to tailor what we need a little bit better by sharing with another community. Counties are banding together now to hire assessors to so that the individual towns will contract through the county, much like our animal control. And so at this point, his suggestion is that we reach out to Vision, who is doing our reval right now, and talk with them about assessing services through the reval period. And he's seen they've done work in other communities that has been absolutely fine. So at this moment, Dave Mylan is working with me on this project, and that's the next thing on his list, is to reach out to Vision and see what we can come up with for a plan, and also who they've worked with in Maine that we can call and talk with the quality of the service and what that would look like, what their contractual services look like. So normally you would get a please join me in, thanking somebody for service. Next thing you normally see is, and the ad will go out. At this point, it would be my plan not to put an ad out immediately, and instead take some time to evaluate what the needs are and implement the system. Because one of the things I don't really want is to get competing firms in here, one doing a reval and the other one trying to do day-to-day assessing. I think that would be a nightmare. So it's kind of my plan.
So when the reval is completed, there are going to be some residents who think they have been overvalued, and they're going to want to come in and talk with somebody about it. Would that be the people who did the evaluation, the reevaluation?
So my plan, Tom, before Mike gave his notice, our plan was to have Mike sit with Vision while they had the conversation. I still think there should be a local representative. We don't know them. We don't know Vision well enough at this point. There are sometimes you can, like when we contracted with Evan to provide planning services, I didn't feel like we needed to have a local rep with us. He was our local rep. I just don't know this firm well enough. So my thought would be I would work with Dave to identify an individual that would make sense to sit, take notes, make sure that we've got good consistency, and that we are dealing with our community in a way that we would want.
And whose decision would it be to modify the value that the folks are doing the reevaluation placed on a property if we felt it was appropriate?
So the first step is that the taxpayers will get notice of their new value.
Yeah.
People who don't like it are going to call or get information.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they're still not happy, they're going to schedule what's known as a value hearing, which is a fancy way of saying a meeting, to come in and review the information. Is the information correct? Because in some cases, we might not have correct information. If the information is correct, it gives them a chance to talk about how assessing works and why their property is valued at what they're valued at. So the town outside of the assessor would not be able to change a value. That is the assessor's job. So when they meet, that's part of the reason why I would want a town representative there. Somebody still isn't happy after they have all the information and they really think that it is unfair, then it goes to the Board of Assessment
Mhm.
review. And so the Board of Assessment review would get all the information from the assessor, the comparables, and hear from the taxpayer and make a decision. So ultimately, it goes to the same group that we impanel for everybody else when there is a disagreement between the assessor and a community member or a taxpayer.
Thank you for that information.
You are welcome.
Anything else you'd like to report on?
Well, I want to remind people that dogs are due to be licensed. So if you have not licensed your dog at town hall yet, you want to make sure you get that done. You don't have to come into town hall. You can do it through the website. And when in doubt, feel free to call 866-2556 and folks can help you. Dogs are required to be licensed by December 31st. There is a 30-day grace period, so they have 31 days. They give you through the end of January. On February 1st, there is a huge fine. It takes a $6 neutered dog license fee to $31. And that is not something that is applied by statute. That is not something that a town can waive. So register your dog, register them early. Don't wait for the last minute if at all possible. If parking is Josh's biggest complaint, dogs are probably Shelley's biggest complaint. I also wanted to give just a brief update on the papers. So nomination papers were available at the end of November. They're due back by January 7th at 4:30 p.m., I think, the end of the business day. We have had a lot of interest. So at this point, both of our incumbent school board reps that have 3-year seats have pulled papers to run again. The person that you had appointed to fill the remaining, or person to fill until the next municipal election. So there's 1 year left on that seat, and that is, we have 2 people who have pulled papers, the person that you appointed and one other. For the council, between the 3-year seat and the 2-year, so we have 3 3-year seats and a 2-year seat that are up. We have 10 people who have pulled papers. This is one of the first years that we've had new folks who are interested that also are running for election under the new charter. So the charter change that we made last year, or was it the year before? It all blends for me now. I think it was 2 years ago. We changed it from a registered voter as being eligible. Anybody who was registered to vote in Orono was eligible to run for council, to that person needing to be a resident of Orono. And they are not the same thing. So we reached out for some help and got the statutory citation. So we're going to use the guidance provided by the statute in Title 31. I think it's 31A, 31, that has us look at multiple factors in determining somebody's residency. So the state, I think, listed 8 or 10 items we will use those very same items and go through that process. But it means if you are a registered voter, you've met one of the hurdles. But if you have a vehicle and you don't register it in Orono and your license has an address on it that's not in Orono, and you keep kind of going down through the list of things that the state says would indicate that you're a resident, we might have a situation where people are registered voters but don't fit the residency requirement and will not be allowed on the ballot. I'm staying right out of that. That is something that Shelley will work on, and if she has one that she questions, she'll work with the town attorney, so that it will be a legal opinion, not a staff opinion.
Right.
But it means that as people provide their papers back, they are also going to get a phone call, and Shelley's going to walk through questions with them to help us understand if they are eligible to actually serve on council. And the reason that that's important is if somebody later on down the road wants to question council decision, and it turns out that we had somebody that does not meet the minimum criteria to serve on council seated there, their votes will be nullified. And we just don't want that to happen. We want to make sure we've got people who are eligible to serve. The other thing is we have people who are pulling for multiple years. So some want to pull 3-year term papers, some want to pull 2-year term papers. They are welcome to pull for both both the 3-year terms and the 2-year term. However, their name can only appear once on the ballot to serve on council. You can't have somebody submit papers for both the 3-year term seat and a 2-year seat. We have one person who's technically on staff who has pulled papers. Under state law, they have every right to do that. If they were elected, they would immediately forfeit their job. So and they've been made aware of that.
Good.
So I think that's kind of the big news. We are continuing on with the employee recognition tomorrow and Wednesday. We'll see the final 2 installments of that. I think folks have been enjoying it, reading about their peers, and we will finish up recognizing new employees and then special achievements that have happened during the year. The town office is going to be closed to the public. Yep, Thursday and Friday. So people need to kind of plan accordingly.
Great.
And I think that's it. Unfortunately, I got caught up in COVID symptoms last week. So I was working from home. I got the whole week it took to get my test to say negative, which we all knew it was going to be. But boss makes a rule, the boss has got to follow the rule.
Absolutely.
So that's what I got.
Any questions for Sophie from council members? No, I think we're all set then. We will then adjourn our meeting. We next meet at this committee on January 25th at 5 p.m. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.